The portion of Yisro is perhaps the most famous portion in the Torah, because in this portion we speak about the 10 commandments, the Decalogue, that God gave the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. Yet, the entire Parsha is called Yisro, who is a non-Jew, who converts to Judaism, and the entire Parsha is called on his name. What is the meaning of Yisro or Jethro? Yisro has two different concepts. Number one is yeter means to add. And because Yisro added a portion in the Torah, the portion was V'ata Sechazeh, the portion dealing with Yisro's advice to his son-in-law Moshe, that he should delegate rather than standing himself all day and judging the Jewish people. So in this Parsha, Yeser, an additional portion was added to the Torah because of him. Number two, Yisro, the Vav of Yisro, implies that he accepted upon himself the additional mitzvos. In other words, a non-Jew, a Ben Noach, a Noachide, has only 7 mitzvot, 7 negative commandments, the 7 Noachide laws, and now he accepted upon himself the entire Torah, 613 commandments. So the letter Vav, even though in Kabbalah the Vav generally represents the Torah, but here Rashi says this letter alludes to the mitzvos, because the word Vav means hook, means connection. And what is a mitzvah? Mitzvah means connection. In other words, in addition to the simple interpretation of mitzvah, which means commandment, mitzvah means, etymologically, tzavtza v'chibur, means connection with God. By doing a mitzvah, we are connecting with the infinite. We are connecting with Almighty God. So the entire parsha is called by the name Yisro. Now, the opening verse of the parsha is Vayishma Yisro. Yisro heard. Says Rashi, Ma shmua shama uva. What did he hear? In other words, what did he hear that caused him to leave his home and his couch and his secure environment, to enter into a desert and to become a nomad, to travel with a nation that was just freed from slavery, and to journey together with them in a desert? This is a tremendous self-sacrifice. You have an amazing brownstone, you have 14 rooms, 25 bathrooms, and now you have to go to a place where there are no lavatories, to go to a place where you're living in a tent, and your floor, instead of being beautiful Italian stone, you are now living on sand. It's a tremendous sacrifice. So the Torah begins with the words Vayishma Yisro. What did he hear? What was the tipping point that caused him to move out of his house and to go into a desert? And says Rashi that what he heard was Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Red Sea. Now, obviously, he heard everything. He heard about the 10 plagues, the Eser Makot, the 10 plagues that took place. He heard about the miracles, how the Jewish people were saved from slavery after 400 years of slavery. And as Rashi says, he also heard Milchamas Amalek, the war against Amalek. And there was the manna coming down from heaven every day. All of these things he heard. Now, it's questionable whether he came after the giving of the Torah or before the giving of the Torah. There are different opinions. Some say he came after Matan Torah. He heard the 10 commandments, that God gave the 10 commandments. If that is the case, why didn't that cause him to come? Others say no, the giving of the Torah was after Yisro came. Either way, Rashi says, Vayishma Yisro, what caused him to actually leave his house and come into the desert was Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Red Sea. What's so unique about the splitting of the Red Sea, that this is what caused him to come now and join Moses and Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, in the desert. Furthermore, how does the Torah introduce Yisro? Does the Torah say he was a big CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Does he say he was a strong man? Does he say he was a good-looking man? What does it say? Vayishma Yisro. Who was Yisro? Choyhein Midyon. He was the priest in Midyon. He was a priest of all the gods and idols of that time. He knew all the deities. This is the way we introduce Yisro. This is something which is frowned upon. Not only are Jews not allowed to serve idols, but even non-Jews are not allowed to serve idols. Noachites, no person in the world is allowed to serve an idol. Idolatry is prohibited for all nations of the world. You don't have to be Jewish to be a good person, but you do have to be a Noachite. You have to accept God as your God and deny idolatry. So yet the Torah calls the entire parsha after Yisro, and the way we introduce him is Choyein Midyon. He was the Kohen of all the idols of the world at that time. The next two words is Chosein Moshe. He was also the father-in-law of Moses. Now this is the opposite extreme. The first point was he was the chief idolater, the priest of all idols. A terrible, terrible, embarrassing statement. Then it goes on to say, on the other hand, he was the father-in-law of Moses. That's the greatest compliment. Because not only did Moses marry his daughter, but now, according to Jewish law, according to halacha, and this is a very interesting halacha, which I find most people are unaware of, just like the Ten Commandments that we talk about in this week's parsha, in Yisro, says, Kabed es avicha v'esimecha, you are to honor your father and mother. The code of Jewish law states you must also honor your father-in-law and your mother-in-law, which means you cannot call them by their first name. And I've seen many people, when I speak to them about their father-in-law, oh, Arthur? Oh, you mean Bob? Who's Bob, I say? Who's Arthur? Now, obviously, I know it's their father-in-law, but I mean to say, how dare you? You cannot call your father-in-law and their mother-in-law by their first name. That is disrespectful. So the Torah already tells us, you should know, he was Choyesei Moshe. And Moses respected him. It's interesting to note that in Yiddish, how do you call your father-in-law? And I tell my daughters-in-law how to call me. They ask me, what should I call you? If I cannot call you by your first name, I say the first thing is do not call me late for dinner. That's the first thing. The second thing is that in Yiddish, you call a father-in-law shver, and a mother-in-law shviger. And it's really, I say, a name of sarcasm, because shver means difficult one. And shviger means difficult one in the feminine. So you're calling your father-in-law shver, my difficult one. But it's interesting that in Hebrew, the way you call your father-in-law or mother-in-law is chami, or chamoti, which means my warmth. It's a beautiful terminology. But you cannot call them by their first name. So the Torah says he was Choyesei Moshe, he was the father-in-law of Moses, and Moses therefore needed to respect him. This is the greatest compliment for Yisro. So on one hand we call him the priest, on the other hand we call him the father-in-law. Furthermore, the Zohar says the following. The Zohar says that the reason why Yisro is called the portion of Yisro, and why in the actual portion it precedes the giving of the Ten Commandments, is that God did not want to give the Ten Commandments until Yisro acknowledged. As he says, number one, Baruch Hashem, the terminology, when you ask a person, how are you doing? We're supposed to respond, Baruch Hashem. Where do you see that? Over here. Vayoyma Yisroi. In verse number 10, it says, Vayoyma Yisroi Baruch Hashem. Thank God, blessed God. That is the normal response that a person is supposed to answer. When a person asks you, how are you doing today? The first thing is Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem good, Baruch Hashem bad, Baruch Hashem tired, doesn't matter. Baruch Hashem. First thing is, thank God, I'm alive, I'm vertical, I'm breathing. That's the first thing you have to answer. Then he goes on to say in verse number 11. Verse number 11. Ata yadaiti. Now I know. Ki godel Hashem mikol hoelikim. I know that God is greater than all other deities in the entire world. How do I know this? Because I am the priest of Midian. I know every other religion, and I'm telling you, there's nothing. You cannot hold a candle before our God. Says the Zohar that God waited for this moment, for Yisro to acknowledge that God is greater than all other gods. It says the Zohar, after God heard this, to quote the Zohar, which was written in Aramaic, Ulubasar Yohiv Oiraisa. After this, God said, I will give you the Torah. Now, God needs Yisro to say, you're greater than all other gods. And if not for that, he cannot give the Torah. Furthermore, the Torah was already given, so to speak. The Torah was already studied before this. And to quote just a few midrashic sources and Talmudic sources about this. First and foremost, the Torah says in the Medrash, Alpayim Shana Kodma Torah Liyolam, 2,000 years, the Torah preceded creation. So already the Torah was there, number one. Furthermore, the Piked Rabbi Eliezer says that God taught Adam, the first human being, the laws of Ibur Shana, the laws of how to calculate the Jewish calendar, and how to know the laws of the Chodesh, the new month, and when to make what we call an Ibur Yar, to intercalate the calendar, to add a month to the year. This already was taught to Adam. He gave it over to his children. He gave it over to Noah. He gave it over to Shem, etc., etc. Furthermore, the Gemara says, Avram Zokin, and the words in the Torah, Avram was old. The word Zokin means one who acquires knowledge. It says Avram Zokin, he was old in knowledge and he sat in yeshiva. Yitzchak sat in yeshiva. Yaakov sat in yeshiva. Furthermore, Amram was a great Torah scholar, the father of Moses. He taught Torah in the land of Egypt. The entire tribe of Levi studied Torah in the land of Egypt. And then he gave it over to Moshe. Moshe was a baby. Already from his youth, he began to learn Torah. He was born in a Jewish house. It says the house was full of light. Alluding to the study of Torah, the first thing a child says is Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe, Meirasha Kilas Yaakov, the Torah that Moses gave us. So Moshe already was learning Torah as a baby. And as you know that when the daughter of Pharaoh found him, she gave him back to Miriam, who brought him back to Yocheved, and he was raised in this house all his life. He knew he was a Jew. All his life he studied Torah. So for 80 years he's studying Torah, and he takes out the Jewish people from Egypt. He now goes on Sinai and gives them the Ten Commandments. So they already had the Torah. They knew the Torah. So what's this thing that God did not give the Torah until Yisro says, now I know God is greater than all other gods. What's happening over here? There's a verse in Kehelis, a verse in the book of Ecclesiastes. And the verse goes like this. V're'isi ani, and I see, says King Solomon, sheyesh yisrein l'chachma min hasichlos. There's an advantage, there's a greatness to wisdom over folly. Ki yisrein ha'er min hachoshech, like the greatness of light that is over darkness. First of all, what does it mean that King Solomon, the wisest of all men, says, I see there's an advantage to wisdom over folly? Do you have to be a King Solomon to know this? So one of the answers that is given is that the folly does not mean foolishness. Folly means all the other wisdoms outside of Torah. Even though they have great knowledge and great advantages, but compared to the chachma, the wisdom of Torah, they're considered to be folly. Ki yisrei na'or min ha'choshech. We all know that light is better than darkness. But what he's saying here is, when the light comes from the darkness, it's a greater light. What does it mean when the light comes from the darkness? When a person lives in darkness, in challenges, in hardships, and then realizes the importance of life, then that life, that light, is greater than living a life that was good to begin with. And similarly in Torah, before God gave the Torah on Sinai, we only had the Geluyim of Torah. We only had the revelations of Torah, which means we had the light of the Torah, a light that is symbiotic with creation, with nature. What happened was, at the giving of the Torah on Sinai, a new level of light entered into the Torah. And that was the light beyond the light, which we call the black light, or the black hole. And this is hinted in the book of Psalms when King David says, Yoshes choshech sisrei, that darkness surrounds Almighty God. In other words, it's so light that it blinds you. It's a light beyond comprehension. It's a light beyond the light. And therefore, the only way we can articulate it is by calling it darkness. So what happened is, on Matan Torah, when God gave us the Torah, He inculcated into the Torah His essence. In other words, a new level of light, a new level of revelation, which is called the black light. This black light came about from Yisro. Because Yisro lived in a world of darkness, in a world of black magic, in a world of a black, dark hole, and now he saw how all of this was bad, this brought about a revelation of the black light from Kedusha, from holiness. It transformed, because God pays you back measure for measure. So because he was so deep in darkness, he was able to reveal now the darkness of light beyond the light. So God waits for Yisro to come along and reveal this new level of godliness. And this is hinted in the words, Kohen Midyan, Chosen Moshe. On one hand, he was the priest of Midyan. He was the priest of Midyan. Why must the Torah say he was a priest of Midyan? It could have said he was the priest of idolatry. Because the word Midyan is from the word Modoin Umariva, which means divisiveness and discord. When it comes to other knowledge, when it comes to external knowledge, worldly knowledge, which is outside of Torah, the more you know, the more arrogant you become. And this is a fact. You look at professors today. We don't have to be a genius to acknowledge this. That big professors, the more they know and the more they think they know, the more arrogant they are. And this brings about tremendous divisiveness. In Torah, it's the opposite. It's supposed to be the opposite. The more Torah you know, the more humble you become. Because if you truly learn Torah, what we call lishma, for the sake of connecting with God, you realize that God is infinite. And you realize how much you know nothing compared to God's infinity. So the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know.
Yeah. It's true.
So comes along Yisro, who's the Kohen of Midian, who knew all the knowledges, who knew all the isms, he knew all the philosophies of all the nations of the world, of all the idols and ideologies. And he came along with this discord, and now he was transformed through Moses. He becomes the Chosen Moshe, he becomes the father-in-law of Moshe. How did this happen? Moshe Rabbeinu, for 40 years lived in the house of Yisro. He was a shepherd from 40 to 80 in the house of Yisro. He ran away from Pharaoh who wanted to kill him after he killed the Egyptian. So Pharaoh had a death warrant for him. He ran away to Midian. Yisro took him into his house. He married Yisro's daughter. And for 40 years he was a shepherd. According to Kabbalah, he shepherded the souls of Israel that were in the sheep for 40 years. And when God saw that he was such a great shepherd, he cared about every sheep, he says, now he will take out my children from Egypt because he will be able to deal with every human being, every one of my children, with love and dignity and to empower them with a future. So Moshe Rabbeinu is now living in the house of Yisro for 40 years. Now, it's true he's a shepherd, so he goes out into the field for X amount of hours. He comes home for dinner each night. What does he do? He has dialogue. With Yisro. So for 40 years, he goes through every one of these ideologies, and he changes the mindset of Yisro. And he brings Yisro to a new level of understanding and comprehension, but because Yisro came from this dark place, he now has a greater appreciation to Torah than anyone else. Now he's the Chosen Moshe. Listen to this. What does the word Chasan mean? A chatan, a groom. We say groom. It's translated as Chasan. And Chosen means the father-in-law. The word Chasan in Aramaic means chus darga, to step down a level. To bring a person down. A chassin, a groom, thinks he's God's gift to humanity. For him to get married, he has to step down. Because why do I have to get married for? I have everything. Why do I need to now commit to one person? You got to get off your high horse. So chassin means you got to step down. But it has also a deeper spiritual concept here. And that is Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, came from a place of min hamayim mishisuhu. It's true that the name was given by the daughter of Pharaoh, but Moses was in the water, and that's what he was given the name Moshe. Originally at birth, he was not given that name. He was given the name Tuvia by his mother. The daughter of Pharaoh called him Moshe, and Torah calls him Moshe. Why was it called Moshe? He came out of the water. Kabbalah says that Moses came from the world of Mayim, the world of water, which is the Alma Diskashya, the concealed worlds. He was so high, he was beyond the physical world. Moses was a giant intellect. He was a giant in spirituality. He was a genius in everything he did, and he was totally beyond the shoulders and heads of all of the people of his generation, which is one of the reasons why he had a lisp. He couldn't communicate. It's a hint to say that he was so smart that nobody had the ability to converse with him. He couldn't relate with anybody. So what does Yisro do? Yisro sits him down at the table for 40 years and says, Moshe, talk to me. Explain this to me. And he brought Moshe down from this level of tremendous godliness and spirituality and genius to a level where he was able to relate with every human being, even a little child. So on one hand, he was Choyein Midian, the priest of Midian, but now, through the fact that he dialogues with Moshe Rabbeinu, he becomes Chosein Moshe. He takes Moses and he has the ability to bring Moses down. Even though it was a descent for Moses, but for us, it gave us the privilege to have a leader that had this tremendous spiritual insight and tremendous knowledge to be able to be our Rebbe, the first Rebbe, the first teacher of Am Yisrael. So this is Yisro. And this is the idea of Ki Yisroin. Again, the word Yisro. Ki Yisroin, as King Solomon uses the terminology, Ki Yisroin, like the advantage, which is the word Yisro. Ki Yisroin ha'er mitoich ha'choshech. Yisro brought about the light that comes from the depth of darkness. And this light is so much greater because it has the ability not only to bring light into a light room, but it has the ability to transform darkness into light. And this is the novelty of Torah. This is the novelty of the giving of the Torah on Sinai. And this is why the giving of the Torah and the Ten Commandments was so important because up until then, the Torah only had light, but did not have the ability to transform the darkness into light. Now that Yisro came along, God says, okay, I'm going to enter into Torah and bring a higher dimension of godliness into Torah, that wherever you take the Torah, anywhere in the world, even in the dungeons, you have the power to bring light. This is why Rashi tells us, Vayishma Yisro, Yisro heard. What did he hear? What caused him to come? Mashmu Shama Uva. What did he hear that caused him to leave his house and go into the desert? He heard the splitting of the Red Sea. What's so big about the splitting of the Red Sea? Of course it was a miracle, but there were also other miracles. There were the 10 plagues, the other miracles too. Why the splitting of the Red Sea caused him to leave his house? So the answer is, he saw how the sea split, not only down here in this world, but as it says in the Kabbalah, all the heavens split. All the heavens split. And he was able to see to the depths of God's throne in the deepest heavens. When he was able to see how the splitting of the sea brought about this new revelation, that not only can we see the bed of the ocean, but we have the ability to see the throne of God, he realized now that he can transform his darkness into light. That even that darkness can be split.
Yes.
And light can shine into that darkness. And therefore he came into the desert. He says, I need now a teacher. I need to be with Moshe Rabbeinu. To be, for me, a mentor to bring me to the next level. I helped Moses get to his place. But now Moses needs to help me to get to my place. And this is the segue to the final story of the Noid Rabbi Yehuda, a famous halachic commentator who once asked a great Hasidic master, who was also a genius in Talmud and halacha, known as Reb Shmelka of Nikolsburg. He said to him, Reb Shmelka of Nikolsburg, you are truly a giant, a gaon in Torah. Why do you need to travel to your teacher, the Maggid of Mezrich, to learn Torah? And he said the following. He said, in Ethics of Our Fathers, it states, Asei l'chorav, make for yourself a teacher, v'yistalik min asofek, and therefore you will remove all doubt. What does that mean? So he quoted here from this parsha. He said, Vayishma Yisro. Yisro was a genius. He was a priest. He knew all the religions. Vayishma Yisro. What did Yisro hear? Mashmu Shama Uba. What did he hear that caused him to leave his house, to go to the desert? Two things. Number one, the splitting of the Red Sea. And number two, the war of Amalek, Milchemes Amalek, that the Jews fought with Amalek. So he said like this. He said the splitting of the Red Sea was a miracle, a big miracle. It was such a miracle that all the nations of the world testified to that miracle. Because when the Red Sea split, it says every sea in the world split. Every water split. You are holding a cup of water, it split into half. So everybody acknowledged the miracle. And after this miracle, you would think, people see God, you would change. You saw a miracle. The nation of Amalek had the audacity, the chutzpah, after the splitting of the Red Sea to attack the Jewish people. Are you out of your mind? Look how powerful they are. Look what kind of God they have. And now you go and you fight against them? He said, you know what? I realized at that moment that it's not enough to have miracles, but you need a Rebbe, you need a teacher to inspire you. When you have a teacher, then v'yistalik min asofek, you won't have any doubts in your faith of God. Because a miracle can happen, you can begin to translate the miracle. Maybe it wasn't really a miracle, it was a low tide, it happened to be timing, good timing, etc., etc. And the day after the miracle, you forget about it. The only way for one to be a God-fearing person, a God-fearing Jew, is to learn Torah every day. You have to internalize it, and for that you need a teacher. It's not enough you read a book. So he said, Reb Shmelka of Nikolsburg told the Noid Rabbi Yehuda, if that is the case, I need to have a Rebbe. And that is the meaning of the parasha, Vayishma Yisro. Yisro heard, he realized, yes, I know the Torah. Moses taught me for 40 years the Torah. But I need a Rebbe, I need a living teacher to give me the ability to grow every single day of my life. So we hope and pray Very, very soon we will see Moshe v'Aaron, the return of Moses, our teacher, and Aaron, together with Mashiach and all the great teachers of history, with the coming of Mashiach, B'mheira B'meinu, Amen.